Okay, it's recording that, so whenever you want.
Okay. I'd like to try to tackle a subject that I have not spoken about in the past. This is new for me, new territory. So I hope that you'll help me along. I'd like to analyze grief. Now, grief has national implication of grief in the period of the 3 weeks we're in, of grieving for national loss. And grief also has the sense of personal tragedy. The definition that I'm working with for grief is a loss that is associated with an overwhelming feeling, an unbearable feeling. That term unbearable is crucial because when we're dealing with personal loss, we're looking to go from unbearable to manageable. And we're dealing with national loss, we're trying to go in the opposite direction. We're trying to go from overly bearable to unbearable, so that there's actual grief. And I think that all grief is that sense that a new reality is unbearable. And if you look at the literature about grieving that comes from the non-Jewish world, you will find various ways people deal with unbearable sense of loss. That includes denial, anger, depression, and eventually some sort of acceptance. And that acceptance usually means that the person goes on to live life as normally as they can, given the new reality. All of those are exactly the opposite of how we're meant to handle grieving from a Torah perspective. So we're really not going to get a lot of help from the secular literature on grieving when we try to understand the process that we're talking about here. Particularly with regard to national grieving, where the whole job of national grieving is to not accept the new reality. That's the mission, that's the job. What we're focused on is how to not accept the new reality. I'd like to just preface with a chazal. The chazal is a Yalkut Shimoni. If anybody wants the source, they can reach out to me for it. The Yalkut Shimoni speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu requesting that that he be allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. And he asks Hashem over and again, can I please be allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael and see Eretz Yisrael? And the Yalkut Shimoni the Mish asks, could Moshe be asking that he be allowed Eretz Yisrael after Hashem already said, Ki lo savor es hayarden hazeh, you are not going to cross the Jordan River? To explain Moshe's request.
All right, I'm leaving. Go back in.
You are using computer audio. Is the sound the volume up? It must.
To explain Moshe's request, we have the Medrash says that that's a mashal to two servants of the king. The king, each one of them did something wrong, and he decreed on one of them that he should not drink wine for 30 days. What was that servant's response? What? 30 days? I'm not going to drink wine for a
All
year.
right, so we missed a little bit.
Ms. Minkrish, please.
Nope, I spoke too soon. What happened?
So I'm not 30 days. What? 30 days? I can manage without wine for a year or two. I'm not 30 days, not a problem. I can handle 30 days. Why, says the Medrash? Why did that servant say that he can manage it even for longer? Because he wanted to dissipate the effect of the master's hand. So he's actually imposed on himself a year or two, even worse than the master had commanded him. And that way he dissipated what the master decreed on him. The king decreed on a second servant that he not drink wine for 30 days. The second servant said, I don't think that I could manage even for an hour without drinking wine. Why did he accentuate, almost aggravate himself with the decree? Says the Medrash, Kedei lechabev divrei Rabbo, to endear the words of his master. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Moshe Rabbeinu asked that be allowed into Eretz Yisrael, even after knowing he would not be allowed to be in Eretz Yisrael, in order to endear the words and the decree of Hashem on himself. He didn't think that he would be allowed in, but he was afraid that he would accommodate himself to the decree. After all, we know Gamzu Litova and Kol Mada Avid Rachmana Litav Avid. Everything's for the best. Whatever Hashem does is for the best. And so that he would start thinking that way about the decree that he not be allowed into Eretz Yisrael. So we now have a paradox. The paradox is that a righteous person goes through the following process. He is, of course, he knows that everything that Hashem does is for the best. But the most satisfying and joyful experience for him is to feel the pain of grief. He knows that grief is custom tailored, that hashgacha pratis, that the grief is custom tailored to spur him on to growth and to tshuva. And so he embraces the pain. And that brings him the joy of knowing that he has a close relationship with Hashem, with the king. So again, the Medrash says that there are two servants of the king. One tries to, I can manage. After all, it's not so bad. We can manage this way. So we don't have what we want. We can manage. You think, oh, that's a wonderful bitachon. A wonderful way that the person feels that he's accepting what Hashem decrees and what Hashem has given him. And that, of course, is true. But the opposite is also true. That if he manages to accommodate himself to Hashem's decree, he is thereby signaling that he's not interested in the personal relationship with Hashem. That combination points, this is the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Henoch Zatzal, points to this contradiction, where a person who has developed himself in a healthy way does both. He is both joyful and he feels the pain of the decree. And he feels joy that he feels the pain of the decree, because he knows that that is what is going to spur him to the growth that is needed. So the first rule, and that's the introduction to our study about healthy grieving, the first rule is that if we're asking, is it good to grieve or bad to grieve? The answer is yes. It is both good to grieve and bad to grieve. And you have to be able to manage both. And that the modern sense that I need to somehow get over it, the modern drive or need to somehow make my peace with the decree, is exactly the opposite of what the healthy person does. The healthy person absorbs the fact that he has a personal relationship with Hashem, and that's how he relates to the decree. I just want to encourage you, if you do have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand. There's a way of raising your hand. Click on the participant, and if I will let you handle that. So once we know that there is good grief and bad grief is trying to just get past it. There are so many people who are dealing with the current situation, nebuch, of the corona. Their only interest and desire is to get past this corona. And it is so sad that they have that reaction. Because if Hashem didn't feel that there was something that we needed to do with the vulnerability that is created by the corona, he would not have brought it on us. And so this effort to try to somehow normalize and get back to where we were before the corona simply invites something, chas v'sholom, more severe than the corona. I just cannot imagine why Jewish community has somehow accepted this idea that it is good that we were just over this or past it. We're not looking to get over it, and we're not looking to get past it. We're looking to make it no longer necessary. We're looking to learn, we're meant to learn from this gezeira, from this decree, in order to make the decree no longer necessary. There's a similar thing, I don't know how well you were exposed to it. There were those who responded to, there was sort of a modern or a postmodern response to the Holocaust. And that was never again. You ever hear something so silly? Never again. Listen to the silliness. We're take military and political action to make sure that such a thing doesn't happen again. What makes anybody think that it happened the first time because it was an accident? It was just a blip on the screen? It shouldn't have happened, and so we're going to make sure it didn't happen again? There's one way to make sure that it doesn't happen again, is to make sure that we don't slip into the same abyss of distancing ourselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the way to say never again. Tshuva is the way to say never again. But to think that the route forward to the never again is by somehow realigning ourselves militarily or politically to fight anti-Semitism? Is that a Jewish attitude? That implies that somehow it happened because we weren't militarily prepared. We weren't politically prepared. If we would have been militarily and politically prepared, it wouldn't have happened. Chas v'sholom, even, whatever. Leave that aside. We are meant to learn the corona is here to teach us about vulnerability. It is to remind us about vulnerability, and that is what all loss and grief is about. It is to remind us that we can do nothing without the specific compassion of the Ribono Shel Olam. And that the illusion that we had, that we were able to live our lives without having to continuously and directly request of the Ribono Shel Olam, to request that we come in peace, we go in peace, that we can still carry on with the business of living without engaging with the Ribono Shel Olam, had to change. And what's so interesting is that somehow if somebody's really sick, so then they need, of course, to engage with the Ribono Shel Olam because they're really sick. So the really sick people, they're the ones who have to daven. And everybody who's touched by the really sick people, so they have to daven. What about the well people? The well people don't have to daven, right? Because they're fine. They don't have to ask that the cake should come out okay. They don't have to ask. They should be able to understand the Gemara. They don't have to ask that they should be able to walk here to there. They don't have to say, I'm fine. Oh, the sick people. Oh, sick people. I gotta certainly have to ask for the sick people. So that completely disregards the entire nature of prayer. Prayer is designed so that we would have an intimate relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We were designed to have needs. And in the course of having our needs, we were designed to have needs in order that we should turn to Ribono Shel Olam with our needs. He's Borei Nefashos Rabbos V'Chesrono. Creates many souls and their deficiencies. So we now have a situation where everybody feels vulnerable. In fact, there was one group of people that weren't feeling so vulnerable. Those were the people who already had the corona. So those people weren't feeling so vulnerable. That's a problem. That's a problem. So Kadosh Baruch Hu, in his compassion, caused that even people who donated plasma, somebody donated plasma, his numbers of antibodies were so high that he donated plasma twice, now has corona again. And that's because there was one population that was not nervous, that didn't feel vulnerable. You can't have that. The situation that we are in calls on everyone to be vulnerable, without exception, including those who already have the corona. Because everyone needs to wake up and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the ability to go through their day. There can't be that the only people who have to turn to the Ribono Shel Olam to ask them to get through their day are people who are terminally ill, Rahman al-Islam. That's not the population. That's not what we're looking for. Now, let's turn that message back to the national grieving. And I think that the national grieving is what we need to look at first because it's in front of us. What happens with the national grieving? We have a problem. The problem is that we've gotten used to the fact that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. And that getting used to that means there's a certain sense of acceptance. A certain sense that we've managed to create life without the Beis Hamikdash. And when we have a situation where we've managed to create life without it, without the Beis Hamikdash, so then our sense that we are in the middle of being given a personal, private message by the Creator that is meant to spur us on to growth and to tshuva, that message becomes diluted. Hashem calls on us to never stop shedding tears over the Beis Hamikdash. V'yikra livechia. Hashem, says the Lezer Kalir, Hashem called for shedding of tears. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Kiviyochol, sheds tears. Al eile ani b'ya. And it's crucial that we mourn. Because if we don't mourn, then we give life to a terrible, terrible charge to claim that the Christian world has been making for centuries, that we are no longer his people. Chas v'shalom. And as Rav Soloveitchik pointed out, there's a wonderful edition of the Kinos, been translated and rendered into English, of the Kinos as explained by Rav Soloveitchik, a remarkable work for those who were privileged, those of us who were privileged to hear him speak about the Kinos. He started the crack of dawn and he explained the Kinos throughout the entire day. And they've collected those explanations into a wonderful volume. And he points out that grieving is a statement of the uniqueness of that which was lost. There's no substitute. And that's why it is so crucial to grieve for a Talmid Chacham. The Jewish people were terribly afflicted because they didn't properly eulogize King Shaul. If a king or a great man was not adequately eulogized and grieved over, that was a sign that the people did not appreciate what the unique message or what the unique gift was of that person being in the world. And that's what happened with the Beis Hamikdash. With the Beis Hamikdash, it has become almost accepted that we're without the Beis Hamikdash. And then suddenly when we have to stop and think about the fact that we're without the Beis Hamikdash, you get very psychologically strange reactions. When you hear people doing what we would call quixotic, like Don Quixote, they're trying to get the whole world to keep Shabbos for 2 Shabbos. We're going to Mashiach. We're going to get the whole world to keep Shabbos. And does that feel like a personal message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu for me? Does that feel like that which I am supposed to be growing? By doing something that is totally beyond my capacity? And I see what happens when people stop realizing that grieving and that grief is meant to be personal. I see what happens. They start sending out emails. They start forwarding emails. One of the profoundly, profoundly silly parts of the modern world. They start sending out emails. Why do you need to send out emails? Well, because that's the only way you're going to get the whole world to change. It used to be that you got the whole world to change by being a taxi driver in Israel. And you imposed your views of the world on every poor victim who got into your car. So anybody who was willing to sit long enough in the car to get a lesson in political science, so you heard from somebody who had a solution to all of the world's problems, and the only difficulty that he had was convincing everybody in the world of the solution that he had. And now he's going to fix that by giving you the lesson in political science. Interestingly, that seems to have ended. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. The taxi drivers have not, at least my recent experience has been that they do not provide you a lesson in political science. It used to be that it was universal. You got into a taxi that was included in the fare. included in the fair was the solution to all of the world's problems. We have a solution to all of the world's problems, and that's called tshuva and tefillah. We have a solution to the world's problems. And the tragic events are meant to make it easier for us to move forward. It's meant to make it easier for us to come closer to tshuva and to tefillah. And you should know that there's a tidal wave of push in the direction of, no, don't use it for tshuva and for tefillah. Just get over it. Use it just to get past it. Don't get caught up in it. And of course, if we're going to grieve like the secular world grieves, then you should get over it. Because the way the secular world grieves is just, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. Okay, get over it. If you can't do anything with it, then get over it. It came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, accept the Gzeira and get over it. If you can't use it as a personal reminder that we are meant to make it easier to daven, make it easier to do tshuva, so then get over it. We're not supposed to wallow in our sense of self-pity. Hashem does not do things that won't help us. Everything that he does is designed to help us. And that's a difficult message. I understand it's a difficult message. But the first step in going towards that message is by acknowledging everything that Hashem does is hashgacha pratis. It is a personal message, and each person feels that grief and feels that loss uniquely. Is there a question? So just to summarize where we're up to so far, we've talked about this remarkable capacity a person has to hold on to a sense of loss. Now, by the way, that is very much paralleled by a person's ability to hold on to a sense of gift. What is a person supposed to do if he receives a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Something that brings him joy. What is he supposed to do? The answer is he's supposed to be able to hold on to it to the point where he could still tap into it 3,000 years later. That's what we're meant to do with the Exodus. So that capacity to be able to store, to have the battery, to store up a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, such as the Exodus, is paralleled by our capacity to store up exile. To store up the fact that we are not where we're supposed to be, that we're in Golus, that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. Our ability to store both of those is what gives us an ability to have an ongoing relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That we can come to the Pesach Seder and feel as though I was redeemed from the terrible slavery of Egypt. And each of us is obligated to feel redeemed at Pesach. And as we know, the same night, the night of the Seder, is also the same day, always the same night of Tisha B'Av. That we're supposed to feel that the Beis HaMikdash is now burning, and we are being sent to exile. First night of Pesach and the night of Tisha B'Av are always come out on the same night. Because our ability to store up a gift of the Exodus is parallel to our ability to store up tragedy and the sense of loss, the national sense of loss. And that ability, everyone in the world is trying to get us to let go. believe, I don't recall the Chazal, but it was perhaps the Tsar who saw the Jews crying and on Tisha B'Av. He saw them crying, and he asked them what they're crying about. And he simply assumed that they were crying about some loss that happened this morning. Somebody passed away. Some loss that happened this morning. So the Jews who were crying said, we're crying over the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. He said, really? When did that happen? So that time, it was 2,500 years ago. 2,000 years ago? You're still crying about a Beis Hamikdash that was lost 200 centuries ago? In that case, you will definitely get it back. In that case, if you're still crying over that which you lost 2,000 years ago, you will definitely get it back. That is the nature of the ability to store tragedy and grief. And when you can store it up and you can build it within yourself, it doesn't paralyze. That's what everybody's afraid of. They're afraid if I grieve, I'm going to be paralyzed. The answer is no, you're not going to be paralyzed. You're going to be humbled. The Western world thinks that humbled means paralyzed. That's the message of the Western world. That if you're somehow having to stop and think about a sense of loss, and you're humbled by the fact that you have this relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, so then you're paralyzed. You're not paralyzed. You're humbled. And that, the night of Pesach, when we remember the gift that we were given, that humbles us. And when we think about the loss, that humbles us. Thank you for the one who wrote me the note that it was Napoleon who saw them crying. I believe that is the case. The message is our ability to store grief. As counter to the Western message that what needs to be done is you need to let go of the grief. You need to accept the reality. And that's where we diametrically oppose. And so the message tonight that we have to take home, the message is Moshe is asking to be let into Eretz Yisrael because he wants to remember that Hashem decreed that he can't go in. Why didn't he make the little calculation? After all, Chazal tell us that if Moshe would have taken us into Eretz Yisrael, the Beis Hamikdash would have never been destroyed, but the people would have been destroyed. Oh, he could have figured out that the best thing that could happen is that he not be allowed to bring the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. Best thing that could happen. Save the Jewish people. And that happens to be true. It happens to be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us by not allowing Moshe to bring us into Eretz Yisrael. Because had Moshe brought us into Eretz Yisrael, there would have been no possibility of Golus. And Golus is what saved the Jewish people, because when the Jewish people abandoned the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the only way to save the Jewish people was to reassign them a new job. And so the reassigned job was to disperse them. That was the reassigned job to Klal Yisrael. So he would have been right. I'll manage. It's okay. I'll manage. It's for the best. But if it's for the best, then you forget that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving me a message. He's giving me a message, and that's meant to help me. That's meant to help me move forward. That's meant to help me do tshuva. So certainly the message today is not the same message as it was at the time of the Churban. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to rev up their sense of loss to the point where it's going to be the same as it was the day of the Churban. That was a sudden shock, and it rippled through, of course, throughout the world. But if we stop and think about the fact, how many people ever feel as though they have cleaned and cleansed their relationship with Hashem? How many people feel good about themselves? That they keep track of what they did right and they keep track of what they did wrong, and they have a vehicle and a tool to be able to be absolutely certain that the record is now set clean. That's what we had when we had the Beis Hamikdash. Everybody walked around feeling as though they had the relationship with Hashem was always intact. The reason why people drift so far away from the Torah and from mitzvos is because they feel helpless to ever make the relationship okay. They just feel that, yeah, we're going to do tshuva. Who knows if I did enough tshuva? Maybe it's impossible. Who knows if I can do it? Yom Kippur, did it really cleanse me? There was a time when the relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu was always being corrected and made intact. If a person is human, he made a mistake, brings a korban, and he knows that he's been niskaper. He knows that he's been it's been cleaned. The relationship is completely intact, and he carries on. So if we look at the psychological woes of the modern world that seems continuously weighed down by its guilt and by the wild attempts to try to cast that guilt off, wild, insane attempts to make so much noise that we can cast off the guilt. Just bear in mind, all of that was different when we had a Beis Hamikdash. A person had a place to go to say thank you. And his wife had a baby, he had a place to go to say thank you. And he had a place to go to say thank you when things went well in business. Had a place to turn to every day in his tefillos, and he was able to turn and look and see the cloud of smoke rising from the Beis Hamikdash pillar directly up to Shamayim. And he was able to visibly see that there is no question about the chosenness of the Jewish people. He didn't have to be subject to any of that kind of discussion. He saw it, turned, and he looked to the Beis Hamikdash, and he saw a pillar of smoke rising that no matter how windy the day was, he saw the pillar of smoke from the Mizbeach rising to the heavens without being pushed by the wind at all. And he said, I am Hashem. And if he did something wrong, he had a place to go. If he had thoughts that were inappropriate, he had a place to turn. And he was always able to walk around with a sense of his head held high because of his humility in the presence of the king. So we didn't have the humility in the presence of the king that was required. So Hashem said, I'll help you with humility. I'll send you into exile. I'll help you humble yourselves. And what did we do with it, Nebuch? Well, we're going to fight this anti-Semitism. What do you think that we were sent into Golus for, if not to be subject to anti-Semitism? That's why we were sent into Golus. It's the installation plan that we weren't destroyed. We were sent into Golus. The installment plan of the hatred that we had to be exposed to. That hatred was meant to humble us. Humble us, remind us of our unique relationship, remind us of how it is that we're supposed to be representing Hashem in his world. And it becomes a political issue, becomes a military issue, and Nebuch. So I would just conclude that, and maybe we should meet again to talk more specifically about personal grieving, where we've talked mostly of national grieving, but the national grieving is meant to be intensified, not intensified in order to paralyze us, but intensified in order that we should be able to take advantage of the humility that comes with having had a personal message of this sort, of this nature. And if we can capitalize on that, then Be'ezer Hashem, Kodesh Baruch Hu will declare that both we can stop crying and that he will stop crying and bring us the joy that he is trying to bring to us. And that joy can only come when our humility is such, when our sense of vulnerability is such that we look forward to it, that we look forward to the manifestation of Hashem's presence in our world. Not that we can make do without it. Making do without manifestation of Hashem's presence in our midst is not a sign of endearment to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's a sign of distancing ourselves from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. The servant who said, well, 30 days, I can manage for 2 years. Not a problem. I can go 2 years without drinking wine. We need to be able to bring up that sense. I can't go an hour. I can't go an hour like this. I can't go an hour without the Beis Hamikdash. And it's not just for people who are sick. It's for those of us, every one of us who feel vulnerable today. And I believe deeply that as HaKadosh Baruch Hu was bringing us to the climax of Jewish history, he's introducing the world to vulnerability. And if you look around you, you will see how everyone struggles with vulnerability. It's some embrace it with a sense of, okay, I'll do what's appropriate to do and daven to Hashem. And the others say, no, we're going to beat this virus. We're going to beat it. We're not going to just use masks because that seems to be an appropriate thing to do. We're going to use masks to beat this thing. We're not going to feel vulnerable anymore. We're going to get that vaccine out here. We're going to get those masks on there. We're going to beat this. Oh, yeah, you're going to beat this. Then why did it come? It came so you could beat it? Or it came so that you could be in touch with your sense of vulnerability? So we are in the period where we intensify our sense of vulnerability. We intensify our sense that a Baruch Hu has sent us a message and a gzeira. We intensify our awareness not so that we should be broken, but so that we should be humble. Hatzlacha Rabbah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll have the recording available only for about a week, so let me know if anybody wants it, and I'll.
Yeah. I
Thank
want
you.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so
I
much.
think everybody would like to hear it.